I did say that we would cover the OBR, leading on from a gilts video we did. You don't have to watch them together. They do work separately, but if you want to tie the two together, then have a look at the gilts video below. So the OBR, also known as the Office of Budget Responsibility, is just a quango. You know, one of those outfits set up so that ministers can dodge their responsibilities when things go wrong. And it wasn't their fault. And the Office of Budget Responsibility holds enormous power over Britain's finances. Its forecasts can make or break governments. They can push your taxes up or down, and they can decide alone if a Chancellor looks credible to the markets. Yeah, those markets that makes the world go round. It was formally set up in 2010 by George Osborne, but the groundwork was laid far before then by Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, because they'd already started this trick of taking powers away from MPs and handing them to unelected independent experts. Brown did the same thing with the Bank of England, stripping MPs of their power to set interest rates. What that means is, really took it away from the people and it put it in an ivory tower that doesn't mix with ordinary people like us, you know, dirty constituents. They were set up as a permanent kind of referee for the government's spending. Sounds impartial, but it isn't. It's just the Treasury, really. Treasury thinking. Who runs the OBR? Well, it's a 3-person budget responsibility committee picked out by the Chancellor, rubber-stamped by Parliament, and its current boss, Richard Hughes, has worked at the Treasury and the IMF and also the Resolution Foundation. That's not the voice of the real world, though. That's pure economist bubble. The Resolution Foundation, by the way, has been very clear on its worldview. Higher taxes, bigger government, more redistribution. And they're fully signed up to net zero 2050 and the push for a faster 2030 transition. Their work says the shift is immense in scale, and they urge big public-private investment. Hello, Klaus, and your stakeholder capitalism. They regularly argue that, done right, decarbonising transport can lower household costs by 2030, and they publish playbooks on replacing fuel duty with higher taxes. Brilliant. So where do OBR forecasts come from then? Well, they don't dream them up. They look like they do, but they don't. They import them. Oil, gas, currency, and interest rate assumptions come straight from the markets. And what I mean by that is what that market wants the market to know about it. The World Economic Outlook comes straight from the IMF. Population and migration numbers come from another quango lifted from the ONS. Tax and welfare comes from the already incorrect figures at HMRC and the DWP, and the whole big forecasting model they use is actually shared with the Treasury. Remember that all the agencies above are all tied to and monitored against the Climate Change Act and the Agenda 30 SDGs that we were all signed up to. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's an absolute fact. So when you consider all of the above and all of that socialist type leaning, do you think that this office is truly independent? Because I don't. And its record is also pretty terrible, because since 2010, the OBR has repeatedly got growth and borrowing wrong. In fact, only one forecast since it was established has ended up with better public finances than they expected. And that's because socialist thinking always believes that socialist policies will work. They're terribly optimistic about that, even though in practice it never, ever has, ever. I am quite happy for you to write in the comments where socialist policies have ever worked financially. Anyway, let's put some numbers on it. In March 2025, the OBR told the Chancellor she had £9.9 billion of headroom of spare kind of availability against her own fiscal rules. But their own average forecasting error is nearly double that, at 19 billion. So their forecasts are out by 19 billion, and they told her she had 9 billion clear. Can you see how that is a complete and utter mess just to start with, right? And it's all based on their guesses that their margin of error will be smaller than what they're wrong on, right? And when ministers try and push back against this team, well, just ask Liz Truss. She skipped the OBR stamp of approval because she didn't trust them. No surprise there then. And the market and the media and the Bank of England all had a massive tantrum. This department employs 49 people, and nearly all of them are ex-Treasury, ex-Bank of England, or ex-City economists. Not one of them, not one, has run a private business, like a farm or a shop or, a factory, something actually real world, because they're the ones that get to decide what's credible without knowing what's happening in practice, or how any of their policies will actually affect real-life businesses. And because net zero is written into law, the OBR must cost it in. And in its July 2025 report, they said that the transition will hit Britain for about £803 billion by 2050. 21% of GDP. It's insane. It's insane. And 2/3 of that spend isn't investment. It's lost tax revenue, including from the loss of fuel duty as petrol and diesel cars are banned. Remember, these guys habitually under-forecast costs. They also peg it to global temperatures, and if they climb towards, say, an extra 3 degrees Celsius, the OBR says debt in the UK could rise by another 56% of GDP by the 2070s. That's their scenario, fed to them by UN climate models. Honestly, it's absolute insanity. I think I've said that 3 times in that video, might be a record. They've modelled climate change out to 2070 in fine detail from all these external sources. But when it comes to the real threats staring us in the face, like an ageing population and the workforce shrinking, and AI ripping through jobs and therefore taxes, they haven't modelled that accurately at all. In fact, they haven't actually paid some of it much attention. For the ageing, they've just over-modelled to the 10th decimal point, but assumed that migration fills the gap of a shrinking working age population, when we all know it can't, because migration is a net cost now. It's not a net gain for the economy. And for AI, well, they've given that a polite mention, but no proper forecast. There are no headline numbers for job losses in the forecast, just a vague, well, it'll probably boost productivity later. It's absolutely useless. Yet you're already seeing the impact of AI with graduates' jobs being down 33% already, and that is said to be due to AI. And unfathomably, The government is investing millions into AI, but nothing on how we'll fund the resulting job losses. Because presumably they still believe it will create jobs, but how? But where? And what does the OBR predict for the green jobs Ed promised you? Well, they've swallowed that hook, line and sinker, even though it's utterly implausible. Don't forget, most green jobs are only in the construction phase. After that, the industry is largely automated. Now, the OBR doesn't even try to model a green jobs dividend in their net zero spreadsheets. It just reallocates unemployment from existing industry and assumes that in 5 years everything will be back to normal. They don't say where these jobs are coming from. They don't say there's a clean tech hiring boom. They just make this assumption that the shock to the industry fades in like about 5 years. The ONS counts green jobs at nearly 700,000. Where do they get those from? Even the government's own methods say onshore wind might support about 45,000 jobs by 2030, but they don't know how long for. They just assume that when people get fired, they will magically be absorbed into another job in another industry, perhaps. And they are wrong. You didn't vote for them, yet they set the boundaries of what your government can do. Now, with a Tory government, you can see that there's probably quite a lot of friction. And in that friction, I'm sure there's quite a lot of debate. But with a Labour government and a socialist civil service, socialist policies being fed in and globalist policies feeding that, there's no argument. We're just down this road of doom with nobody with any sense whatsoever talking to them about it, because under no circumstance is the OBR a neutral watchdog. It's small, expensive, it's a quango that imports globalist reports. Of course it's got to take global reports and use them in forecasting, but really, UN world views? And then it plugs it into ONS migration numbers and then enforces it into the laws we've already signed up to. And that's why it gets its forecasts wrong again and again and again. But because it's statutory law, it still is able to dictate policy. And that's how you end up with governments trapped in managed decline, raising your taxes or cutting your services to satisfy spreadsheets with worse hit rates than the Met Office. And they, as you know, are shit. And when this bill lands, whether it's 803 billion for net zero or 55 billion this year for tax raises, it's not them who pays, it's us. And I have a problem with that. I have a problem with the MPs that you have elected not getting a voice. Now, I'm not saying all of these MPs are like the sharpest knife in the drawer, but they represent constituencies who can give them real-world information about what's happening on the ground. That should be taken into account, and it isn't. And what's more, all budgetary responsibility should start and end with the very people you vote for, not with an unelected globalist department who doesn't have your best interest at heart. Anyway, that's my view. What's your view? Let me know below. Like, subscribe. We'll do it all again.